I'm going to go through just a lot of information today, and then at the end you can ask me questions. My contact information is up on the screen too. I'll have it at the end as well. And if you want to contact me later, I'm happy to continue to work with you as you do some research into this new venture. So we're going to talk today mostly about LLM programs, but I am going to go into some different types of programs as well, just in case there's any interest out there for other kinds of programs within law schools. So first I thought I would talk about the American law degree. So this is called the Juris Doctor, and traditionally our students can go to what they call undergraduate degree, get their undergraduate degree in any topic, any kind of subject matter, and then they go on to 3 more years of a Juris Doctor. And this is what it looks like. Their first year, we call it their first year curriculum, is kind of foundational courses in things like civil procedure and constitutional law, contracts, criminal procedure. All of these courses are pretty standard at any law school. So most law schools all across the country, people in the first year are taking the same kinds of courses. And then your second and third year, you get to pick and choose kind of specific courses that are of your interest or your concentration. So there's also some graduation requirements, things like skills courses, writing courses, things to help you prepare to take the bar, professional responsibility. These are all courses that most law students also take. And then you might hear a term called experiential learning. Many people use the term co-op or internship or externship. These are all pretty similar. The co-op is a little bit different. So for instance, our school, the Kline School of Law at Drexel, and also a few other law schools, I think Northeastern and maybe one other, have what we call a co-op program. So all of our students are required to do a semester co-op where they're working with a law firm or in the government or something, and they're treated really not as an intern but more as part of the team, and so it's a little bit more of a hands-on experience. Students also have to do pro bono work. That's a requirement to sit for the bar, so it's a requirement for law school graduates as well. And then there's opportunities to do clinics, which is additional kind of hand-on support, but this is with a teacher, a professor kind of as your mentor, working with real clients out of the law school. So this is what the Juris Doctor, the traditional U.S. law degree looks like. And so what we have is most schools have created an LLM, a Master's of Law, which is available some for domestic students as well, U.S. students who have gone through their traditional 3-year and want to kind of specialize in a particular area. But mostly it's for students who have received their LLB or their sort of undergraduate education at a different school and want to come to the U.S. to study in order to sit for, not necessarily to sit for the bar, but perhaps to sit for the bar. So this is what this looks like. You would do your degree in your country of origin, and then you'd come to the U.S. for a 1 year. Almost all of the LLM programs are 1 year, although some you can come a little early for a summer program. Some will allow you to stay a little longer, but mostly they're 1 year. And then there's the potential to take the bar exam. And we'll talk a little bit more later about more details on the bar exam. But it's important to know that you don't have to take the bar exam. It's not a requirement to graduate, but that possibility is definitely there. So what's the value of an LLM? So obviously, it's a great opportunity to come and understand American law, which may make you more attractive in a global market. You know, we are even more connected than ever. We are practicing and writing policies that, specifically in business, that will kind of go all over the country, and it matters very much if you understand American law and law in other countries as well. It gives you an ability to work in many jurisdictions, and of course it allows you to practice your English. It might open up doors to practice law in the United States, or certainly with a more international company. And the degree is an internationally known credential. There are certain countries where it's becoming a differentiator that is really helping folks to get jobs. So there is definitely value in an LLM, and it varies, and it depends on your career goals. But certainly if you have a specific interest in law that you're interested in practicing in, it's a good idea to kind of reach out to some folks. If your plan is to come to the US and then come back, it's a good idea to find out if it will be helpful for you in the career market, because it does vary, by country and by topic. So there's a few different types of an LLM. You may see something called a general LLM, or it might be called something like an LLM in American US legal system, something more generic or more broad like that. And in this kind of situation, it's you'll have a few mandatory courses, something like an intro to US legal systems, or a legal writing course, or you might hear the term legal methods. That's sort of a writing and research kind of course. So you'll have a few requirements, and then you're kind of allowed to take whatever courses interest you. You'll have an advisor. Every school you'll have an advisor who will be able to tell you, the types of work that's in the course that you're interested in, and will kind of help you map out a plan based on your interests. And this approach allows you to, if you're not sure what you want to specialize in, or if you are sure but your school doesn't have a specialization per se, you can kind of focus, or you can try lots of different areas of the law. There's a specialized LLM, and these vary school by school. So for us, for instance, we have a business specialization, we have an international law specialization, intellectual property. So there's different specializations where you'll have, again, a few mandatory courses, but then the rest of your courses will be kind of mapped out. You'll have a list of courses that fall in the category of, say, intellectual property, and you'll need to take courses only from that list. So it's a little bit more structured. And in some cases, your degree might actually say Master of Law in Intellectual Property instead of saying Master of Law in American Legal Studies. So if that is important to you, then that might be worth considering as well. But you'll leave with a profound understanding of the topic that you're studying, which is, one of the best values of the LLM. You'll see that there's typically not any sort of thesis requirement or capstone, depending on what you call it, kind of requirement for an LLM or major research project. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it. So a lot of law schools will have the opportunity for you to do, research with a professor, to write a thesis. If that interests you, I would say definitely talk to your advisor early on when you first get into the program, so that they can help you figure out how you can accomplish that goal, because it's not typically a requirement. So I want to talk a little bit about some other types of programs that you might see as you're beginning to look at law schools, so that you know what they are. If they interest you, great. If not, so at least you can navigate things as you're doing research. So one thing that you may see is called a Master of Legal Studies, and this might be confusing because the LLM we just talked about is also a master's. But the Masters of Legal Studies, it may be called an MJ, Master of Jurisprudence. These are master's degrees for students who do not have an undergraduate degree in law. So, and these are for international students and US students, but these are for people who do not have an undergraduate degree in law. These they're kind of like MBAs, kind of more like business degrees. They tend to gear towards compliance and regulatory work in specific industries. So for instance, human resources or health law, things like that. But the important thing here is that doing this degree, you can't sit for the bar exam, no matter if you're international or US. So this is just sheerly for additional information. And a lot of them are online. Many of them are live, but a lot of them are also online. So just so you're aware and you know that is available, but it's also, it might not be exactly what you're looking for. So make sure to see if it says something about non-lawyers, look at the application requirements. The MLS is the same. There's different types. So it can either be a specialized type, or it can, and with special areas like cybersecurity and compliance and those kinds of things, or it can be a more general degree where you can kind of pick and choose. Very similar to an LLM. And the value is similar too: proficiency in English, understanding the legal global market. A lot of the MLS degrees are, again, geared more towards compliance and cyber and things of that nature, which are, really, really important areas in law and business right now. But often those classes, which are really great, LLMs and JD students can also take too. So there are also JD programs for international students, Juris Doctorates for international students. So if you're thinking maybe you want to, maybe try to work for a year after you go to the United States to study, doing OPT, you might want to do a JD. If you're just wanting to stay longer than a year, you might want to do a JD. So the JD programs for international students are typically 2 years. So you can see there's a 2-year global JD programs. There's no LSAT required. United States students have to take an LSAT test. But if you are an international student with an undergraduate degree in law, you do not have to take that test. You're basically transferring credits from your LLB into the law degree. So it's a 2-year program. So it's nice if people are, wanting to stay for a little longer in the US. Of course, it's more expensive and more time. And then it also allows you to sit for the bar in any state in the United States. So it kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility if you are thinking about working for an international organization, or again, trying to stay and work for a year afterwards, depending on what your visa will allow. Some schools will allow you to take your LLM degree and roll it into a JD. So even if you're thinking now all you want to do is an LLM, but you get there, you love your LLM, you want to stay for another year, that's a possibility too. So it's good idea to be thinking about that as a possibility before or when you begin to apply to schools. In this case, again, there's no LSAT required, and what they're doing is basically transferring your credits from the LLM into the JD, and this is a 3-year program. You may also see something called an SJD. These are more like doctoral programs with a heavy focus on research. So you can see that these are for students with outstanding academic credentials who want to have an academic career. So if you're thinking you want to continue teaching, then this might be a nice opportunity for you. You get a doctoral advisor to help you with a dissertation, a big research project. You'll take courses and you'll do your research, and it takes 3 to 5 years. A lot of schools require that you have an LLM first. So again, this might be just something you have in the back of your mind, depending on your career goals, as you're going into the LLM program. And then another opportunity is research fellows, and these vary by different law schools. There's an opportunity to teach and to conduct research. Many of these, they're unpaid. You're teaching, you're working in the United States, and they're unpaid. But again, these vary. So if that interests you, you should think about schools that might interest you and see if they have these available. So I want to talk a little bit about the bar exam because I think a lot of students come wanting to do the LLM and thinking they need to do the bar exam, or want to understand kind of what is the draw, what's the benefit. So the bar exam there's different state rules for state. So each state has different set of requirements, although a lot of states right now are coming on to sort of this joint bar, which is going to be very helpful. But still, right now, many states have different requirements. So you need to pass the bar in the state in which you want to practice. So say after you're done with your LLM, you know that you have a job lined up for a year-long OPT internship in New York, then you would need to pass the New York bar to be able to practice law in New York. So some bars have what we call reciprocity rules, meaning you can transfer your state bar from one to the other. Again, that's limited. So there's a big chart that shows you all of the states and all of the regulations. And even though I've been doing this for a few years, I'm still constantly looking at that. It constantly changes. So if you're thinking about doing the bar, it's really worth kind of looking over especially if you have a specific area of the country that you're thinking about focusing on. And not all states allow foreign graduates. So there's a very short list right now of states that will allow you to take the bar with an LLM degree. California and New York being the two sort of most popular that everybody tends to take, but there are a handful of others. That is in part why the global JD and the SJD might be attractive to you, because again, if you do those programs, you can take the bar in any state. I had the same twice. Okay. Scholarships. So want to talk just a little bit about the money side of it. It's an expensive endeavor for sure. But most schools do offer some form of scholarship. Most of them don't require any additional applications. So meaning that when you apply for the program, you're automatically considered for a financial aid or a scholarship offer. These are typically based on merit, meaning they're looking at your grades. They're looking at your TOEFL score. Those are two really important things. They're looking at your essay, because that's a good writing sample to understand, your ability to write. And based on those three things, they will offer you scholarship money. There are some schools that will have additional applications for what we call need-based aid. In that case, you might have to submit additional documentation to show there is a substantial financial need. And that will be outlined on every law school's website. So these are good questions to ask when you're thinking about a specific law school and you're applying. Usually they will have some sort of information on their website, but you can certainly reach out and ask more. So for us, for our LLM and our global JD program, when you apply, we are looking at your scores, as I mentioned, and then in your acceptance letter, you'll actually get your scholarship offer in the acceptance letter. And it's very rare that you'll find a program that's going to be fully funded. If you are an exceptionally outstanding student, top 5 of your class, great work experience, excellent TOEFL or IELTS scores, it is a possibility that you may find a school that will offer you a fully funded scholarship. It's not unheard of, but it's pretty unlikely. Most schools, the max they'll give would be 70 to 80% of tuition, which is still wonderful, which is great. But it's definitely something that you need to think of in advance. And the other thing you need to think of is cost of living. So for instance, everyone wants to go to school in New York City and in California, but those are very, very expensive places to go. And, certainly consider them. There might be great opportunities there, but you need to think about housing costs, transportation costs. These are considerable extra costs, and your scholarships from the institution will not cover those costs. So it's something to think about. There are many great schools off the coasts, in the middle of the country. Also, for instance, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia is often a city that's overlooked, but so Philadelphia is 2 hours south of New York City and about 3 hours north of Washington, D.C., and it is way less expensive than either of those places, but very easy to get to. So when you're thinking about it, when you're thinking about looking at schools, look at a map, look at where they are in the country. You can definitely do some research into cost of living. You can ask. Sometimes websites, law schools' websites will have something about cost of living. But it's definitely something to consider, because you may get a full ride at a city that's so expensive, it still ends up being too expensive. And housing is another thing to think about. So some law schools might have what we call graduate student housing available. Again, not free, but it would be on campus, a little bit easier for you to kind of navigate. But most law schools aren't going to have that. They're going to have resources for you to find housing, what we call off-campus housing. So it's something that you would want to think about as well. And learn about each school and learn about how you can get connected with a potential roommate or with information on what houses are available and how to do that search. But that's a process. So you want to give yourself some time to really think about that and to look into that. So admissions. For this, I'm going to talk strictly about the LLM because I think that that's what most people are interested in. Again, surprise, it varies based on school. It makes this whole process a lot more difficult because everybody's doing something different. But it varies based on school, although I will say that most schools are going to require the similar things. So I'm going to go through them here. Obviously, as we mentioned, you must have a first law degree from a foreign law school. You can apply to be in an LLM program while still finishing that first law degree. They might do what they call a conditional acceptance, meaning that they like you and they will accept you into the program, but you'll have to send your final transcripts before you can actually start. So that happens a lot. It's totally fine. Most schools that you don't need work experience before coming into the LLM program, but some may require it. And certainly no matter what, it always looks good to have some work experience. And it's good to have professional recommendations as well. So always keep in mind that we have hundreds of applications and there's a limited number of spots. So if, definitely don't be discouraged, but know that, strong academic credentials are, going to be really, really beneficial for you and experience. And then, as I mentioned, some schools might have years of work experience. So if you're really liking a school, go to their admissions page, make sure that you understand what the requirements are before you apply. So close attention is paid to the grades of the applicant. So one of the pieces of materials you'll need for your application are any transcripts from any higher education learning that you have completed. So we're going to look, we know that different educational systems grade differently. So don't worry about that. We know there are some countries where grades just flat out don't matter. And we know that. We know some countries grade harder than others. In the US, we have a big grade inflation. Everybody, gets good grades. So we know the people reading the applications understand the different countries and the different types of transcripts we might see. So we're aware of that. So you're not going to be held to a specific standard because of that reason, because we know all countries are different. But we are looking, and it's important to have good academics for sure. And we're also looking for people who will contribute to the intellectual life. So one of the ways you can demonstrate that you are going to bring a lot to the classroom is through your personal statement. And I don't know if I don't have anything on here about the personal statement, so I'll just talk a little bit about that. Your personal statement, for most schools, they're going to just ask for a personal statement. Some might have a word limit or max or minimum, but most it will be open, and it will say, tell us why you're interested in studying in the US. Why are you interested specifically in studying at my law school? And tell me anything about you that I don't know about you through your application. What makes you interesting? What are your passions? Have you experienced something great in your life? There's lots of topics that you can cover, and certainly your advisor or someone at school or a friend can kind of talk through it with you. It's really important that essay is well organized, well written, and error-free. So make sure that you have someone who has a really great grasp of the English language to go through and edit it and work with you to make sure that it's the best piece of writing that you can offer, because there's a lot of weight given to that statement. And if you're unclear on how long it should be or any instructions, just ask your admissions counselor for that school. But usually if there's clearly defined restrictions, it's going to be on the website where they list their application materials. For most schools, they're going to ask you to go through lsac.org to set up a profile and to actually apply. Some schools will allow you to mail in documents or email documents, but most schools are going to ask you to go through this. And the reason is because your transcripts have to go through what they call a credentialing evaluation service, right? So this is because I speak 2 languages, English and Spanish, and other than that, I'm not going to be very good at looking at a transcript and evaluating it myself. So what this service does is goes through and it kind of puts things in comparison, and it lays it out into a way that I can understand, and also because the educational systems are so different, so that I can understand what it means, and how you compare to the others in your class, really is how they kind of break it down. So the LSAC does that for you, which is why a lot of law schools will say to go through this program. So you'll go on lsac.org, you'll make a profile for an LLM, and there is a limited fee. I think I'm not exactly sure. I want to say it might be around $80 US, but I'm not positive. And that fee will cover the evaluation. It will also be a place where you can submit all of your materials. So all of your transcripts, your TOEFL scores, your resume or your CV, your personal essay, you can put all into this profile, which makes it really, really easy for you to apply to schools. So once you have everything in your profile on lsac.org and they've done the evaluation and your TOEFL or your IELTS, your English language test score is in there, you can then go and easily click which schools you want to apply to, and they'll just send all of your stuff over to those schools. So it's really great if you're planning on applying for multiple schools, which you should, because lots of programs, again, are different, and you might get a different scholarship offer from lots of places, and you might learn, after you get a really great scholarship offer, you might do more research into the city and like it. So you should definitely apply to multiple schools, and I can talk more about that if anyone's interested in that later. So that's that. So again, typical requirements. The application form, so each school will also have a specific application, mostly with demographic information, just basic, name, email, phone number kind of questions. Then you have your official transcripts, your letters of recommendation. Most schools are going to ask for 2 letters of recommendation. These can be from a faculty member. They can be from an employer. They should be from anyone who really knows your work ethic well, or has had you in class and understands how you are in school. So it shouldn't be family members, shouldn't be friends, should be someone who can speak to you as a worker or as a scholar. And I often say to students, you should, if you're going to ask someone to write a letter of recommendation, not everybody is good at writing them or really knows what's supposed to be in them. So I say, give them your CV or your resume and remind them of the wonderful things that you've done, or how your relationship is with them, and ask them to kind of focus on those things. So obviously you're not going to write the letter for them, but you can kind of give them some guidance, and that will ensure that the letter is a little more telling than it might be if you didn't give them some guidance. Your proof of English proficiency, so you're going to take either the TOEFL or the IELTS. The minimum score requirements are different for each law school and different for programs, right? So for us, our LLM requirements are a little bit lower than if you were going to do the JD, the global JD, the 2-year JD. The requirements are a little higher. So the TOEFL, the IELTS, I think, would probably range anywhere from a 6.5 to a 7.5, kind of around there. TOEFL is probably somewhere between 80 and, of course, above. But again, check with the school because it may be different from each place. Your personal statement or motivational essay might be what people call it, which we talked about. Your curriculum vitae or your resume. This is just information on everything you've done in school, any kind of work experience, research that you've done, presentations that you've done. That resume or CV is really an opportunity to just get it all out on the table, brag about every single thing you can think about. That's a good opportunity. That is your professional place to brag about yourself and what you have achieved. So don't leave anything out. Show that to someone who knows you and knows your work well, because they may think of something that you've just forgotten to put on, and it's really important. And then I mentioned application fee. So some schools will have an application fee. We don't at our school, and many schools don't. Some schools might have a fee, but they'll offer a fee waiver if you do something, if you attend a webinar, or if you just ask. So if you see there's a school with an application fee, I would definitely ask if there are waivers available. Don't just blindly pay that fee. Often there will be waivers available. And if not, if there aren't waivers available and you have to pay that fee, typically those are schools with really, really tough, just so you know, those are schools with a lot of, like, hundreds of applications and really tough admission standards, because they can charge that fee. So just something to think about as you're doing your research and you're looking. So I went through a lot pretty quickly, but I am happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Or if there's another kind of area you want me to talk more about, I'm happy to do that.
Do you have some questions? I will check about our online listeners.
I think I see one.
About scholarships.
Yes. So you may have come on a little bit later, but I'll talk about that again in more detail. So most schools do offer scholarships. Again, look on their websites. In many cases, they offer a merit-based scholarship, which means they're looking at your grades, your resume, your TOEFL or IELTS score, and your writing sample. And based on that, they're going to give you a scholarship, a merit-based scholarship. So you don't have to do any extra applying. But some schools might have what they'll call a financial need-based scholarship. And in that case, you will likely have to provide an additional application with additional sort of documentation as to why you have a great financial need. And then that's a little bit different of a process. But most programs at this point are giving scholarship to LLM students. You likely will not see a program that will give a fully funded scholarship for an LLM student, but for exceptional students, it might be a possibility. And certainly, around 70 to 80% of the whole tuition is a possibility. But those scholarships will never, I don't want to say never, I guess never's not a good word to use really ever. But those scholarships typically will not cover cost of living. So there's a financial awareness you need to have there. And then I don't know if Liz can speak to any kind of scholarships that are available through EdUSA or Fulbright or anything else.
Okay, it sounds like we don't have any questions more. If you have any questions after this lecture, you can write to Audrey, I think. Here's her email. And thank you very much for your lecture. I don't know if you see me.
I can see your shoulder. Here you are. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.